Hello, and welcome to episode 4 in Pause, Rewind, Play, where we're talking about TV technology. And on this episode, we're talking about consumer AI in the media and entertainment space. Have with me again my guest, Jason, to talk through this. And so I think we're going to talk about what it is, applications of it, potentially some thoughts about challenges that we might face and also the future of it. Shall we just dive straight in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's go with definitions. So when I was writing my notes of this, I thought about kind of where consumer AI has come from, in the context of media entertainment.
Right.
And I think for those in the industry, certainly, we would think to like an example of something like machine learning driven recommendations. That would be a go-to example.
Mm-hmm.
It's been around for some time, used and talked about by many organizations. I think there's also the idea of virtual assistants as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we'd be massively remiss not to talk about the last few years and the snowball that is Gen AI.
Right.
Seems reiterating at this rate on an almost weekly fashion. And then, so I'll definitely poll for your thoughts in a moment, but let's keep that in mind for a second. So we talk about definitions, and then the other half of that for me, which is the bit I think about a lot, which is importance for customers, everything around that. But let's just get your initial thoughts on each of those two. So some thoughts on what it is, how it came to be, and then a little bit about on why it matters, the so what of it, if you like.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I think at the moment, if you look at the tools that are in the wild, they are really designed as, general purpose sandboxes that enable the technology to be in the process of continual learning. And I think that it's easy to sometimes look at the tools that are made available to the public today and think of them as the finished iteration of that product. Whereas in actual fact, they're very much in their infancy, right? They're almost in junior school, where the teachers, the Gen AI platforms and environments are the pupils, and we're educating them based upon the things that we already know.
Yep.
And it's very much a case of being able to do things at scale far quicker than we can do them ourselves without computer assistance or without computational assistance. And I think now, as people have used it more and more, and most people now, I think, that have experimented with it, have a sort of baseline understanding of what that means to them as a tool. I think what's missing now is, what does that tool mean to me as an individual? I think now it's quite, it's well understood that it has an impact on society. It has an impact on the way that society is likely to adapt and evolve in the future. And I think we're at that critical point now where we're having to now think about governance and compliance and regulation of the technology, thinking about the guardrails, thinking about protecting that capability and delivering it as a benefit to society, but doing so in a controlled and regulated way. And I think what we know from past experience is that regulating social experiments with using current technology, it is challenging because of the concurrency of information exchange. If you just look at the way that content is created today, if you look at the way that the internet is processing transactions today, it's very, very difficult to take that system and then apply governance on top of that system and regulate that system in a controlled and defined way. So I think that's the challenge that a lot of the governments and the governing bodies today are faced with, is how do we create this tool, but how do we deliver it to society in a controlled and regulated way?
I mean, in the media and entertainment domain, I'm not even sure really that. I think plenty of talk about AI and ML techniques within the industry itself, but for consumers, I think it's been if you like, a tool's been sat in the background, used to deliver outcomes or experiences for customers. So let's go back to that recommendations example.
Yeah.
You may not care that machine learning or other AI techniques are used to deliver you that experience. You do care about the outcome of it. The recommendations are good, for example. But what I was going to go on to say was that I feel like whilst we've been leveraging these techniques for some time in the background or in the service side, that it's only really come to the fore for consumers, as in it's been, and you only need to look at the marketing of various consumer-facing services to
Right.
AI being mentioned often now, whether it's regards to devices or a particular feature or just any kind of marketing literature. It will pull that comment, that term, right to the front within the
Yes.
because
Yeah.
and it
Okay.
always feels like a table stakes conversation, but I do feel like Gen AI within that has done that. Right? It's brought it. It's made it a consumer-facing or an element of marketing to consumers, whereas before it was the service in general with some techniques running in the background. And it's an interesting one. I think that those background techniques as well were giving you, if you think about outcomes that users care about, efficiency, effectiveness, and the best experience you could get. There's no question those techniques have helped. Now we're in a whole different world, and like you say, it's I feel like we're all only at the moment giving input to or teaching a toddler. Like it's
very much so. Yeah, very much so. And I think that's the key point in terms of the training data and individuals' relationship with the training process, that we are, and I've said this many times in public comments, that we are both the pupil and the teacher in this instance. We're not passively learning from this as a tool or benefiting from it passively. We are actively determining the behavior of the future iterations of that as a tool. And I think what we'll see happening probably fairly quickly is that technology will begin to start becoming segregated off. That technology will begin to start becoming more structured around use cases and problem solving, rather than it being a much more generic tool to do things quickly.
There's a lot of toys out there.
There's a huge amount of toys, right? You can make images, you can make songs, you can make a full animation in about 5 seconds. But the challenge with that, I think, is that it removes the human element. And I think there's a subtle balance between it being a complementary tool that enables you to offload non-critical thinking tasks to a compute process and enable you to focus on creativity per se, and then bringing the two things back together again to create a more valuable sum of the parts.
So that's the two things there. I think we should talk about how we could end up reducing. We could end up with a situation with reduced human creativity, which would, I don't at least feel anyway, be a great thing. But before we get to that, there was a great segue into how AI techniques are permeating their way through the whole content delivery chain today. And we can look kind of right back up near towards the source in terms of content creation and production. And to your point, using tools to automate or speed up or catalyze things like editing and script writing seems like a no-brainer. And even the creation of actual content that would be consumed, AI generated video itself. And then you've got the area which I see sometimes when I'm watching various live sports, which is there's some sort of overlay which is claiming real timeness. It's claiming some sort of AI in its delivery.
Okay,
we pick those three categories, like the upfront editing and script writing, the generation of actual video content, and then the AI overlays. Is there any one of those three that you have a particular thought about that you'd like to comment on? And I don't think it's necessarily an area that either of us have spent lots and lots of time, but it is interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of commentary on if you look at sort of the pre-production environment and the workflow environments. Absolutely, AI is sort of front and center in the thinking in terms of how that environment gets optimized. And doing that in a cloud compute environment, again, is another way of optimizing it. But again, I think that the drivers there are that's solving identifiable problems. because it's time critical,
Yeah.
especially if you're dealing with linear live broadcasts, you're dealing with sports, you're dealing with news, you're dealing with anything that's time critical. Any tool that can help you maximize your resource to time ratio is a plus, right?
Yes,
so
100%.
it's easy to quantify the value proposition. By the time you get down to the consumer end of things, it's harder to quantify the value proposition because it has to really be driven by, it's a bottom-up approach. You need to be solving a consumer problem. Is it doing things, is it making things simpler to understand? Is it making things more accessible? Is it making things cheaper? You know, they tend to be quite simple problems that need to be solved. And so that's why I'm sort of suggesting that these things will coexist and they will have their own center of gravity. I think the pre-production environment and the kind of workflow environment will
Efficiencies to be had.
there's efficiencies and optimizations that are driving that. But I think at the consumer end, I think the really interesting element of that is that you quickly get to the point where you've got an equivalence of those tools and capabilities that exist today at enormous hyperscale in the cloud, in global networks, but taking just a very small subset of that value and then creating a personalized, literally a personal version of that thing that is yours and yours alone, and that exists within your physical control. So it's a thing that's within your control, it's within your physical domain, but it can still coexist and still leverage the value of those other systems, whether they're pre-production systems or otherwise.
Hello! I hope you're enjoying the conversation in today's episode. I just wanted to take a moment to say a huge thank you to Spicy Mango, who are our Series 1 sponsor. If you're looking to build global scale media and digital publishing platforms, Spicy Mango bring that serious expertise. They dig deep, they look at your business goals, and they ensure technology actually does what it should do in order to drive growth and remain cost effective. You can get in touch with them at spicymango.co.uk. And with that, let's get back to the episode.
State of the art as it has been somewhat recently in terms of AI techniques, and again, moving from the kind of content creation side down to distribution and customers. So we've had AI infused content discovery. We've had a degree of targeted advertising that is now leveraging some degree of machine learning in the background. And I think there are, what you're saying is go further, right? We could go further with a very, not just personalized content, but personalized experience. Right?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I mean, gamification is a good example, right? You take gamification and the gaming industry is always one of those, it's a great industry to gravitate towards because the numbers within the industry are significant and it's non-geographical, it's non-gender based, so it doesn't have the typical boundary points that some things have, like sports and other things may gravitate towards specific countries or specific genders or so on and so on. So the great thing about gaming in general is that everybody has a relationship with the experience of gaming, whether it's simple pick up and play games or something a bit more involved, or right the way through to competing in local, national, international leagues, right? It's a massive industry. So I think there's an interesting kind of segue there between the engagement with games, the actual playing of games and being part of that experience, and how that translates to content consumption. And I think there's an interesting storyline that could play out there where you could have, I've discussed this with other colleagues in the past, where you look at being able to create a very unique timeline around maybe an experience that is a TV series, right? And that might be a specific character from that game, but then you could create literally your own narrative, right? You are almost the editor and the director and the producer of that experience, right? So it then becomes AI enhanced, right? But you're taking elements of that gaming experience that people will have a real connection with personally, and you're creating something a bit more unique that's content driven.
Yeah, it may be, and whether those are assets that you may have your own
transferable assets, exactly,
fan created or user created.
Yeah,
that is such a great, what should I say? How to make something so much more real and grounded and valuable than necessarily like anyone can go these days to a Gen AI video creator and make 10 seconds of a video that will be at some reasonable resolution now that the models look, all look pretty good. For some reason, and maybe it's just of ease that they're often in slow motion. You mentioned before anime, like anyone can do that these days.
Right.
But it's just a video off of a prompt that you made. And the challenge of a lot of it is now, and it's already happened, it's become kind of quite commoditized. Like I can see a squirrel playing cricket or, a rabbit riding a bike or whatever other, option you want to come up with. But it's not connected to anything. Right. And so to your point, being able to do across the broad plethora of entertainment you're consuming and different types of entertainment, be able to do something that's a bit more interactive and linked and has a grounding in what you're interested in consuming.
Exactly.
Suddenly that clicks it over into so much more of valuable content creation to start with.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And I think that for example, you could see in the future that you might have a situation where you would have a really popular TV series, but the characters in that TV series were created and their characteristics defined by a fan or by an individual or by a gamer. And so you then start to kind of combine all of these value propositions that are driven by consumers again. So it's back to that whole idea of, blurring the line between what is a consumer and what's a creator. And actually, when you think about creating content with AI, it's not just the version that we see today where you're relying upon the AI exclusively to do everything. You create a unique value proposition in that environment, and it's a transferable value.
Yeah, it's a tool for transformation.
It is, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, well, that's great. I mean, I think we could talk about this literally all day. We may end up doing, but let's try and do a little bit around futures, around predictions. There are many areas I think that could benefit from the leverage that AI gives. One that personally excites me is this area of augmented or virtual reality. I think XR, in kind of umbrella terms, but I think the idea and specifically if it's sensor based and specifically if it's real time, that you could use some sort of AI accelerator tooling to be able to boost what's your experiences with AR, that for me seems really, really exciting. It allows you to combine, what you see in reality with potentially entertainment or other types of content that are being overlaid. But imagine if that overlaid content is AI infused and it's reactive and it's fast and gives you something you couldn't do before. Because a lot of the AR experiences today, like for example, can you lay out a bunch of desktops or screens within a room that you're sitting in your goggles and see them kind of matted and placed in the right place? Yes, you absolutely can. Is it valuable for me to be able to watch video on a screen that floats inside of my living room? Answers on the postcard.
Right.
But if what you were doing, let's say you move from your living room out into the street, you've still got this overlay running, but you've got then with an AI accelerator running in the background, entertainment augmented experiences happening, then I think there's a whole new dimension that opens up. I think just simple overlays are interesting to a point and have utilitarian value. Is a call coming in? Do I need to send a message? That sort of stuff. It's all quite interesting. Do I want to catch up on the latest podcast whilst I'm walking? All cool, like all very good.
Right,
fine.
right.
But an idea of being able to blend, to your point, to blend and mix entertainment into that experience, and it's going to need AI to do it because there's going to be some quite substantive real-time processing to make it happen. I think that, I personally think is, we're not there now, and we probably won't be for a little bit. Hardware pending. We need probably a couple more generations. But that for me feels like a really interesting, different, new, exciting, interactive experience. Are there any? Would you agree with that, or are there things that you think for the future of AI within media entertainment that are more interesting again? Because
I think ultimately you'll end up with multiple personal AI assistants, and I think that you will ultimately govern and control how they interact with each other. They can interact with each other, and I think they will interact with each other. So you will have one that is your mobile platform AI assistant. You'll have one that's your media AI assistant, but it will take on a personality unique to you, and it will almost be your digital representation in that specific domain, whether it's sports or entertainment, or whether it's learning and education. They can coexist, and then you'll have this pool of AI assistants, but they will then all exist within your own controlled sort of federated learning environment, essentially.
So you think it's a zoom up from that, where, like you say, whether it's assistant, agent based, whatever you want to call it, a pool of those,
pool of them,
which one is for entertainment?
Yeah, they will be characterized with specific goals and specific characteristics.
And then within entertainment, is it back to that point you made about being able to consume and create?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you then have the process then in place to create that circular economy where you are both you're blurring the line between creator and consumer at that point. You then define how transferable the value is between those different domains.
Yeah,
you define that. That's completely under your control. I think ultimately you're going to need some kind of blockchain transferability mechanism to define that, but these things don't exist today, right? That's why we're talking about it in the context of it being a futures initiative. But I think that would be the direction ultimately that you would end up in.
Are you excited for what consumers can expect in the next 5 to 10 years? Can you imagine a short to near to midterm future that is going to be fantastic for consumers? I mean, invariably there will be challenges and growing pains that come with it. But can you envisage a future in the next kind of 5 to 10 years where AI-infused entertainment is different than now, better than now, broader and more, like you talked about, broader and more interesting than now? Is that something that you're positive about?
Yeah, I think what's uniquely different in the future is that the personalization or the optimization of the experiences, the consumer themselves will be far more in control of that. And the way that information is used and to optimize experiences, ultimately the consumer themselves will own and control that information. That data repository will be yours and yours alone.
So this is like this, as we talked about just prior to the episode, this currency of consumption.
Exactly, yeah. And then leveraging things like private cloud compute and secure enclave and so on. They're the sort of technology enablers that give you that environment to do things safely, securely, scalably, to be able to use much larger hypercompute environments as required. But ultimately, you end up creating your own much smaller, simpler, defined equivalents of that is ultimately always yours and private to you and controlled by you.
I think quality, and there are many, many different dimensions of that. I'm thinking most of all about quality of experience, but there's many other areas that you could apply quality to, but that's going to be a bit of a key consideration, isn't it? Because what you can say about many current forms of media and entertainment consumption today is they're mature. And so many of them have reached a certain threshold of quality. What we're talking about here is so new, and to the extent that it hasn't even happened yet, that's going to have to be a primary consideration. I think things that are executed poorly, that don't have good quality, well, they should probably fall by the wayside.
Right. Exactly.
Pull that out as something that matters. Do it, but do it well.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But you have to have that transferability and that common framework that enables all and any content sources to coexist within that pool of value.
Yeah.
And for it to be transferable within that.
Well, I mean, look, I think we've covered so much.
Yeah.
We've talked about a little bit about definitions and the function, the role of AI in today's media and entertainment environment. We've talked about how it's used, potential some of the consideration and concerns that come with it. We've talked a little bit about future outlook.
Yeah.
Do you have a final kind of insight or recommendation? I mean, I know that you were, when we talked before the episode, this concept of like that AI doesn't allow you to fail. I think that was such a fascinating point to bring it up.
Yeah, well remembered. The idea that inherently the ability to try and fail is a fundamental human characteristic, and I think AI, if we're not careful, will normalize the average. So we end up with where we have this sort of
specifically Gen AI, I think.
Yeah, specifically Gen AI. Yeah, and I think you're seeing that in some of the tools that are available today, where you look at it and go, in isolation, that 5-10 minute, 10-second clip looks amazing, but if I look at the entire website, there's 1,000 of the same,
Similar.
slight variations of the
Similar,
same
yeah.
thing. So again, it's that normalization of the average that is the thing that we need to be aware of, because AI as a tool doesn't allow you to fail. It's just an enhancement of the process of creativity fundamentally.
Good point. Such a good point. Well, look, thank you very much, Jason, for your thoughts on this. I think it's been fantastic. Thank you for watching through to the end. If you made it to here, please do subscribe or drop a like. And I think the key thing to keep in mind is that when you're talking TV technology, sometimes it is good to pause, rewind, and play.